There's a new name at Fox 32 covering the Bears, and on her very first day, she may have accidentally confirmed one of the worst kept secrets in Bears media this entire offseason. Fave here, and we need to talk about Josh Sweat because this rumor just got a real jolt of credibility from someone with actual inside knowledge of the situation. Not just another anonymous insider posting cryptic hints on social media. Let's get into it because there's a lot to unpack here between the reporting, the contract math, and what this would actually mean for this defense if it happens. Fox 32 introduced Devin Caney as their new Bears beat reporter this week and before joining Chicago. She spent years as a sideline reporter covering the Philadelphia Eagles, which put her around Josh Sweat constantly during his time there, including through their Super Bowl run. That's not a small detail. That's years of proximity to a player. His personality, his mindset, the way he talks about his career when the cameras aren't necessarily rolling. When the station put up an old photo of her interviewing Sweat during that Super Bowl celebration on her very first day at the new job, she didn't just smile politely and move past it the way most reporters would in that moment. She looked dead into that camera and suggested she might be looking at a picture of herself standing next to a future Chicago Bear. Now, I want to be careful here because that's a reporter having a little fun on her first day on a new beat, not a confirmed report with sourcing behind it. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that's breaking news. But given everything else swirling around this situation for months now, it's exactly the kind of moment that gets Bears fans talking, and for good reason. Because timing and context matter in this business. Here's the actual substance behind the rumor, because this didn't start with a first day joke on live television, and I want to walk you through the real reporting trail that's led us here. Sweat signed a 4-year, $76.4 million deal with the Arizona Cardinals last offseason after 7 seasons with the Philadelphia Eagles, where he won a Super Bowl and made a Pro Bowl appearance. That's a resume that speaks for itself. He's now entering year 2 of that Arizona contract, and according to Cardinals insider Kyle Odegaard, Sweat has not exactly been thrilled with his situation out there since arriving. He skipped the start of Arizona's voluntary OTAs entirely back in the spring. And while Odegaard didn't pin down the exact reason for the absence at the time, he reported hearing for a while now that Sweat simply isn't happy in the desert. He did eventually show up for mandatory minicamp once that portion of the offseason program began, so I want to be clear this isn't a case of him refusing to be in the building at all or staging some kind of dramatic holdout. But the underlying frustration reportedly hasn't gone away just because he showed up for the mandatory portion of the calendar, and reporting since that point has continued to connect his name to potential trade destinations around the league. It's not hard to understand why once you actually dig into the situation and the timeline of events. Sweat reportedly signed with Arizona largely to reunite with head coach Jonathan Gannon, whom he'd worked with previously when Gannon served as Philadelphia's defensive coordinator during their Super Bowl run together. That relationship and that shared history was reportedly a real driving factor in his free agency decision last year. Arizona fired Gannon this past January after the team finished a brutal 3-14 season. So you take away the primary reason a guy signed somewhere in the first place, pair it with a rebuilding roster that just posted one of the worst records in the entire league, and you've got a 29-year-old former Super Bowl champion sitting there 1 year into a 4-year commitment, wondering what exactly he's doing on a team trending in the opposite direction of where he expected to be when he signed. There's also a real concrete financial piece sitting underneath all of this that shouldn't be overlooked. Sweat's contract has no guaranteed money remaining beyond this current season, and according to Bleacher Report's Mo Moton, that lack of long-term security could genuinely be motivating him to want either a rework deal with fresh guarantees or a change of scenery entirely to a situation that offers him more long-term stability. That's exactly the kind of situation that gives a motivated, opportunistic front office a real opening to make a move. And here's why the Bears specifically make so much sense as a landing spot if this situation continues to develop the way it's been trending. This defense needs pressure in the worst possible way, and I don't think that's a controversial statement to anybody who watched this team play last season. Chicago managed just 35 total sacks as a unit last season, tied for 7th fewest in the entire league, a genuinely alarming number for a team with real Super Bowl aspirations heading into this year. Pro Football Focus graded their overall pass rush as the 8th worst unit league-wide, and Chicago finished 22nd in the NFL in pressure rate, highlighting just how inconsistent this front was at actually bothering opposing quarterbacks on a down-to-down basis. Roughly a third of that entire sack total came from a single player, Montez Sweat, which tells you the rest of that room simply wasn't getting home to the quarterback with any real consistency throughout the season. Austin Booker showed real juice when healthy, finishing with 4.5 sacks, 35 tackles, 12 quarterback hits, and 29 total pressures, genuinely encouraging flashes for a young player. But he was limited to just 10 games due to injury, and everybody else on that edge functioned more as a rotational depth piece than a true reliable difference maker opposing offenses actually had to game plan around. Now compare that entire situation to what Josh Sweat actually is as a player right now, in the middle of his prime. He posted a career-high 12 sacks last season, appearing in all 17 games for Arizona, adding 13 tackles for loss, 17 quarterback hits, and 4 forced fumbles along the way. Zoom out across the last 4 seasons of his career, and he's been remarkably, almost boringly consistent in the best possible sense of that word, racking up 37. 5 sacks, 44 tackles for loss, and 7 forced fumbles over that stretch, doing it across 2 completely different defensive schemes in 2 different cities with 2 different sets of teammates around him. He's 29 years old, 6'5", 265 pounds, built like a genuine tank on the edge of that defensive line, and he brings real, legitimate physicality against the run in addition to his pass rush production, which matters enormously to a coordinator who wants his edge rushers setting a physical tone on early downs, not just teeing off in obvious passing situations. This isn't a boom or bust flyer you're betting on hitting a career year at the perfect time. This is a proven, dependable, durable, double-digit sack producer entering what should still be a genuinely productive stretch of his athletic prime, with a track record that spans multiple systems and multiple coaching staffs. Let's talk about the money involved here, because this is genuinely where things get interesting, and I think it's the part of this story that separates a realistic front office conversation from pure fan fantasy football. Sweat's 2026 cap hit currently sits at $18.1 million, which ranks just 19th among all edge rushers league-wide at this point in the market. For a player who just posted the best sack total of his entire career, that's real, tangible value relative to where the top of this specific market has climbed to over the past couple of off seasons. The complicating piece, and I want to be completely straight with you about this instead of glossing over it, is that any team trading for him would almost certainly need to negotiate some additional guaranteed money into the back end of that deal to actually smooth things over and make him a genuinely happy camper in his new city. Since the current contract runs completely dry on guarantees after this upcoming season. That's a real substantive conversation a front office would have to navigate carefully, not a simple plug-and-play swap where you just absorb the existing paper and move on with your day. As for what it would actually cost Chicago to acquire him in an actual trade, the reporting has varied pretty widely depending on which analyst you ask, and I want to walk you through a few of the specific proposals that have been floated publicly so you can see the range we're talking about. Sports Illustrated's Mike Moratis pitched a package built around a 2027 third-round pick heading to Arizona in exchange for Sweat and a 2028 sixth-rounder coming back the other way to Chicago as a sweetener. Bleacher Report's Gary Davenport floated something a bit heavier in his own proposal, a conditional 2027 third-rounder plus a separate 2028 third-rounder, essentially valuing Sweat as a true difference maker worth real sustained draft investment rather than a bargain bin depth add. Christopher Knox even built out a wilder, more elaborate 3-team scenario involving the Carolina Panthers and Cole Kmet changing hands as part of a broader framework designed to help all 3 franchises solve different roster problems simultaneously. None of these are official offers on the table right now, just credible analysts working through plausible trade math based on comparable recent deals around the league, but the realistic range you're looking at sits somewhere around a day 2 pick, give or take a selection or a swap of future assets depending heavily on how much additional guaranteed money Chicago's front office is willing to commit going the other way to actually get this done. Now let's talk about what this defense would actually look like on the field if a trade like this comes together, because honestly, this is the fun part of the whole exercise to project out. Picture Montez Sweat rushing off one edge on any given passing down, and instead of an opposing offensive coordinator being able to slide extra protection his way for 4 full quarters and build an entire game plan around neutralizing one player, they've now got Josh Sweat lined up on the completely opposite side of the formation, forcing them to actually pick their poison on every single snap. You simply cannot double team both of these guys at the same time without exposing something else critical in your protection scheme, whether that's a running back stuck in pass protection against a blitzing linebacker or an interior lineman left one-on-one against a talented defensive tackle. That alone should genuinely worry opposing quarterbacks walking into Soldier Field or facing this team on the road. Then you bring Austin Booker off the bench in a rotational role behind both established veterans, a player who, even in a limited 10-game sample last year working through injury, still put up real, meaningful, tangible production that suggests a legitimate third piece to this equation as he continues developing. Run the two Sweats combined numbers together from last season, and you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 22 combined sacks and nearly 100 combined pressures between just the two of them alone, before you even factor in what Booker or anybody else on that defensive line contributes across a full season. And no, despite what half of Bears Twitter is undoubtedly going to assume the moment this trade gets announced, if it ever happens, they are not related to each other in any way. Purely a coincidence of shared last names, but it absolutely makes for one heck of a headline and a genuinely fun storyline either way heading into a season with real expectations attached to it. I do want to give you the complete honest picture here, though, because I don't want to just run full speed with the hype train and completely ignore the very real pushback that exists on this story. Ian Rappaport has reported that, according to his own sources within the league, Sweat is not currently being actively shopped by the Arizona front office. Cardinals head coach Mike LaFleur has been asked directly about the swirling trade rumors on multiple occasions now and has said publicly that he doesn't pay much attention to whatever offers are supposedly being floated around the league, adding that he's simply excited about the fact that he personally doesn't have to game plan against a player of Sweat's caliber as an opponent twice a year. He's also praised Sweat directly as a good person who goes about his professional preparation the right way. That's about as clear and consistent a public denial as you're realistically going to get from a coaching staff trying to project stability around one of their best defensive players heading into a new season. And look, I respect Ian Rappaport's reporting a great deal. He's genuinely one of the most plugged in, reliable insiders in this entire business. And when he says something with that level of confidence, it deserves real weight in how we evaluate a situation. But anybody who's followed the NFL trade rumor cycle for more than 5 minutes at this point knows that not currently being shopped reports have a funny, well-documented way of changing course once training camp pressure actually starts building in earnest, or once a genuinely disgruntled player makes his unhappiness loud enough and public enough that an organization can no longer comfortably manage the situation behind closed doors. We saw exactly that pattern play out with Myles Garrett in Cleveland not too long ago, a situation where firm, repeated public denials from the organization didn't ultimately hold up once the player's frustration became truly impossible to ignore or paper over any longer, where there's this much smoke swirling around one specific player. A genuinely unhappy veteran, a fired head coach he specifically signed to reunite with just 1 year earlier, a brand new beat reporter with real, years-long personal ties to that exact player, dropping not-so-subtle hints on live television during her very first broadcast, and a team with an obvious, glaring, statistically documented roster need at that exact position. I'm personally not ready to write this entire story off just because one credible report says it isn't actively happening right this moment in July. These situations have a habit of evolving fast around this league, and training camp always seems to be exactly the moment when the real dominoes start falling on stories like this one. Once padded practices begin and the pressure of an approaching regular season forces genuine decisions. Here's my actual honest take on all of it after walking through everything we know right now. If Chicago's front office can find a way to put together a reasonable, defensible trade package, likely centered around a day 2 pick or a modest combination of future selections, And if they're genuinely willing to rework Sweat's existing contract to add back some fresh guaranteed money to make the move worth his while and address his actual underlying frustration, this is exactly the kind of aggressive, calculated swing that turns a good roster into a genuinely scary one heading into the fall. This isn't a situation where Chicago necessarily needs to blow out its entire draft capital chasing some Max Crosby caliber blockbuster swing that could set the roster back for years. This is a proven, durable, double-digit sack producer with real playoff pedigree, a Super Bowl ring, and a track record of sustained production, who might genuinely be available for a price this front office can actually stomach and absorb responsibly, specifically because his current professional situation in Arizona has soured for reasons that have nothing whatsoever to do with his level of play on the field. That specific combination, elite, proven talent paired with a genuinely motivated seller for reasons unrelated to performance, is exactly the type of situation smart front offices around this league are trained to jump on before somebody else beats them to it. So here's what I want to know from you watching this. Would you be comfortable with Ryan Poles giving up a legitimate day 2 draft pick plus reworking the contract to include extra guaranteed money to bring Josh Sweat to Chicago before the start of this season? And does the timing of a brand new Bears beat reporter with real years-long Eagles ties hyping up this exact connection on her very first day on the job change how seriously you're personally taking this entire rumor? Drop your take in the comments. Smash that like button if you want to see this pass rush get real proven reinforcements before the season actually starts. And subscribe to Favs for more no-filter Bears news, rumors, and breakdowns all summer long as this story continues developing. Bear down.